Elena Vasquez sat in the same seat she had occupied for the past 12 years. The council chamber stretched out before her like a vast cathedral made of crystal and light. 47 species had representatives here, each sitting in their designated spots. The Therics with their multiple arms, the Velothians who looked like walking trees, the Andorians who floated in tanks of liquid, and the humans who sat near the back as always. Elena looked down at her tablet. The proposal on the screen had taken her team 6 months to prepare. 6 months of calculations, simulations, and modeling. The Kepler transit network was failing. Anyone with basic engineering knowledge could see it. The network connected thousands of star systems, allowing ships to travel faster than light. Without it, the galaxy would become isolated. Travel between systems would take years instead of days. The numbers were clear. In 8 months, the first major junction would collapse. Within 2 years, the entire network would be unusable. Elena's team had found a solution. It was elegant, relatively cheap, and could be implemented quickly. She had presented it 3 times already. 3 times it had been ignored. Today would be the 4th time. Chancellor Thexler floated at the center of the chamber. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. He was old, very old. He had led the council for 600 years. To him, humanity was still an infant species. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. Most council species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. The human delegation wishes to speak, Thexler said. His voice resonated through the chamber, musical and cold. We will hear their proposal regarding the transit network. Elena stood. She walked to the speaker's platform. She had given thousands of speeches here over the years. Some had been received well. Most had been ignored. She began her presentation. The transit network is experiencing cascade failures in 17 primary junctions, she said. Our analysis shows these failures will spread. We've developed a solution that can stabilize the network using modified harmonic dampeners. The technology exists. The cost is minimal. Implementation can begin immediately. She brought up the data. Graphs and simulations filled the air above the speaker's platform. The evidence was undeniable. The network was dying. Her solution would work. For a moment, there was silence. Then Thexler spoke. The council thanks the human delegation for their enthusiasm, he said. The word enthusiasm dripped with condescension. However, the transit network has functioned for 12,000 years. It was built by the Forerunners, species far more advanced than any currently present. Perhaps in another millennium, your species will understand the complexities of such ancient technology. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not all species laughed, but enough did. Elena heard a Draxi counselor whisper to his neighbor, loud enough for everyone to hear. The apes think they can improve on Forerunner engineering. More laughter. Elena stood there, data still floating in the air, proof of the coming disaster right in front of them. And they laughed. This was not new. For 200 years, humans had been treated this way. When human doctors had cured the Andorian plague, the council had barely acknowledged it. When human diplomats had prevented war between the Tharics and Veloth, they had been thanked with the same tone one might use for a helpful pet. When human agricultural experts had ended famine on 12 worlds, the council had accepted the help and then forgotten who provided it. Elena remembered every slight, every dismissal. Every time a human proposal was rejected without consideration. Every time human scientists were excluded from important projects. Every time human representatives were interrupted or ignored. 200 years of it. She thought about Dr. James Chen, who had spent 30 years developing the cure for the Andorian plague. He had died last year, never having received official recognition. She thought about Ambassador Rodriguez, who had negotiated the Therics-Veloth peace accords while being excluded from the celebration dinner. She thought about the thousands of human workers across the galaxy, doing jobs no one else wanted to do, solving problems no one else could solve, and being treated like unwanted guests. Something inside Elena broke. Not dramatically. There was no anger, no shouting. Just a quiet realization that this would never change. Humans could cure diseases, prevent wars, save worlds, and it would never matter. They would always be the young species. The primitive newcomers. The apes. Elena closed her tablet. The holographic data vanished. She stood there for a moment, looking at the council. These beings who had accepted humanity's help for 200 years without ever offering real respect in return. "Then we will take our leave," she said. The chamber went quiet. Thexlar's crystalline body flickered with confusion. "Your leave?" he asked. "Article 19 of the Galactic Compact," Elena said. Her voice was calm, professional. "Any member species may withdraw from the Council with 90 days' notice. Humanity hereby invokes Article 19. We will be leaving." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Thexlar made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're upset because we did not accept your proposal," he said. "This is understandable. Young species often struggle with rejection. Return to your seat, Ambassador. We will discuss this matter at a more appropriate time." "No," Elena said. "The decision is made. Humanity will withdraw from the Galactic Council. Starting today, we will begin the process of removing our personnel from all Council projects and territories. The withdrawal will be complete in 90 days, as specified in the Compact." She sent the formal notice to every Council member's system. Legal, proper, and final. Thexlar examined the document. His crystalline form darkened slightly, indicating mild annoyance. "Very well," he said. "If humanity wishes to isolate itself from galactic society, that is your choice. Perhaps time alone will help your species mature. We will acknowledge your notice of withdrawal. Is there any other business?" He moved on to the next agenda item without another glance at Elena. The Council returned to their discussions. They had already forgotten about humanity's announcement. It was just another complaint from an inferior species. They had heard it all before. Elena walked back to her seat. Her hands were steady. Her assistant Marcus Webb stared at her with wide eyes. Did we just quit the Council?" he whispered. "Yes," Elena said. "But the transit network, the medical programs, the trade agreements, everything." "We're leaving it all," Elena said. "Send word to Earth. Start the withdrawal protocols. Every human in Council space comes home. Every project, every mission, every installation, we're done." Marcus looked at the Council chamber, at the representatives who had already forgotten what just happened. "They don't even care," he said. "I know," Elena said. "That's exactly why we're leaving." That night, Elena sent encrypted messages to every human installation in Council space. There were thousands of them. Humans worked everywhere in the galaxy. They were doctors, engineers, teachers, farmers, diplomats, technicians. They were the people who fixed things when they broke. They were the people who solved problems everyone else had given up on. They were the people who did the work no one else wanted to do. And now they were all going home. The message was simple. Article 19 has been invoked. Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All personnel are to begin orderly evacuation. You have 90 days. Leave everything in good order. Train replacements where possible. Be professional, be polite, and then come home. Across the galaxy, humans read the message. Some were surprised. Some were angry. But many, when they thought about it, felt something else. Relief. Dr. Sarah Kim read the message in her quarters on the Andorian homeworld. She had spent 15 years there, training local doctors and researching new treatments. The Andorians were polite to her face, but she had never been invited to their medical conferences. Her papers were often published with Andorian names added as primary authors. Her suggestions were ignored until an Andorian suggested the same thing weeks later. She looked around her small quarters and smiled. Time to go home. Engineer Thomas Wright was working on the Draxi orbital station when he received the message. He had been there for 8 years. The Draxi needed his expertise but treated him like a servant. He ate in separate facilities. He was not allowed to attend social gatherings. When his innovations saved the station from a catastrophic failure, the credit went to his Draxi supervisor. He finished the repair he was working on, documented everything carefully, and started packing. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Humans began preparing to leave. They did not rage or protest. They simply began the quiet work of departure. They finished their current projects. They wrote detailed instructions for their replacements. They trained the local workers as well as they could. They were professional to the end, but they were leaving. All of them. In the council chamber, Thexlar barely thought about humanity's announcement. It was a tantrum, nothing more. The humans would cool down and return. They needed the Council more than the Council needed them. Their economy depended on galactic trade. Their colonies relied on the transit network. They would be back within a year, apologizing and asking to rejoin. He turned his attention to more important matters. The Council had real problems to address. The transit network was experiencing some minor issues, but it had been functioning for 12,000 years. It would continue functioning. The Forerunners had built it to last forever. Humans were just humans. Young, emotional, and temporary, the galaxy would barely notice their absence. That was what Thexlar thought. That was what most of the Council thought. They had no idea how wrong they were. The first ship left exactly 1 week after Elena's announcement. It was a medical transport, carrying Dr. Sarah Kim and her team from the Andorian homeworld. The Andorians watched them go with mild curiosity. A few seemed concerned. Most did not notice at all. Dr. Kim had spent her last days training her replacement, a young Andorian doctor named Thesix. She showed him everything: how to monitor the adaptive vaccine system, how to adjust the formulations for new mutations, how to identify early warning signs of plague resurgence. Thesix took notes and nodded politely, but Dr. Kim could see he did not truly understand. Not the way she did. He was learning the steps, but not the thinking behind them. The system will alert you if mutations occur, she told him on her last day, but you need to check it manually every 3 days. The automated system sometimes misses subtle changes. Thesix nodded. The automated system is Forerunner technology. It does not make mistakes. It's not Forerunner technology, Dr. Kim said gently. It's the system my team built 15 years ago. And it's very good, but it's not perfect. You need to check it manually. Thesix looked confused. You built this? But the Council records say. The Council records are wrong, Dr. Kim said. My team developed the vaccine and the monitoring system. We've been maintaining it ever since. Check it manually, Thesix. Every 3 days. Promise me. Thesix promised, though she could tell he did not believe her. When she boarded the transport, she looked back at the medical facility one last time. She had saved millions of lives there. She wondered how many would die now that she was gone. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human engineers left their posts on space stations and infrastructure projects. Human teachers finished their final lessons and said goodbye to students who barely seemed to care. Human farmers handed over detailed instructions for crop rotation and soil management. Human diplomats closed their offices and departed quietly. The Philothian scientist Rixtar watched her human colleague pack up his laboratory on the research station they shared. Dr. Michael Torres had worked beside her for 12 years. They had published 17 papers together. She considered him a friend. You don't have to leave, she told him. Surely Earth will change their mind. This is just politics, Michael smiled sadly. It's not politics, Rixtar. It's dignity. For 200 years we've been the helpful children, always eager to please, always grateful for any scraps of recognition. It's time we stopped begging for respect we're never going to receive. I respect you, Rixtar said. I know you do, Michael said, but you're one person. The Council doesn't respect us. Most of your people don't respect us. We're tolerated, not valued. There's a difference. He sealed the last container of his equipment. Take care of yourself, Rixtar, and pay attention to what happens after we're gone. Really pay attention. Rixtar watched him leave. The laboratory felt empty without him. She tried to continue their research alone, but it was harder than she expected. Michael had a way of seeing connections she missed. He thought differently. She had not realized how much their collaboration depended on his unique perspective. The withdrawals continued. Week after week, humans departed. They left detailed documentation. They left equipment in good repair. They left no messes, no chaos. Their departure was orderly and professional. And quiet. So very quiet, most species barely noticed. A few individuals who had worked closely with humans felt the loss keenly. But the vast majority of galactic society went about their business as usual. Humans had always been in the background. Now they were simply not there. It seemed to make little difference. On day 45 of the withdrawal, Elena received a message from Earth. Her government wanted to know if she was certain about this decision. The economic impact would be significant. Hundreds of trade agreements would end. Thousands of joint ventures would dissolve. Was she absolutely sure? Elena looked at the data stream showing the withdrawal progress. 60% of human personnel had already departed. The rest would leave on schedule. She thought about the transit network data, still showing the same pattern of cascading failures. She thought about the council's dismissive laughter. She thought about Dr. Chen, who had died without recognition. "I'm sure," she sent back. On day 60, the Therics and Valoth had their first serious dispute since the peace accords 20 years ago. A trade disagreement over border territories. Normally, a human mediator would have stepped in by now. These small conflicts happened regularly. Human diplomats had become skilled at resolving them before they escalated. But there were no human mediators anymore. They were all gone. The council sent a Draxi mediator instead. He was experienced and well-trained. But he did not understand Theric's honor codes the way the human mediators had. He did not know that Velothian negotiators needed 3 days to consult with their root clans before making decisions. He pushed too hard, too fast. The talks collapsed. Both sides left angry. "We will resolve it later," Chancellor Thexlar said when informed. "These species have had disagreements before. They will work it out." On day 75, the first crop failures occurred. The 12 worlds that had been suffering from famine 25 years ago were thriving now. Their agricultural systems had been transformed by human expertise. But the humans who had designed and maintained those systems were gone. The local farmers tried to follow the instructions the humans had left. But farming was not just about following steps. It required understanding when to adjust irrigation based on subtle soil changes, how to rotate crops based on local pest patterns, when to supplement nutrients and when to let fields rest. The humans had known these things through experience. The local farmers were learning from scratch. Crop yields began dropping, not catastrophically, not yet, but 30% below normal. On worlds that had only recently escaped famine, that was significant. On day 82, Thesix checked the Andorian plague monitoring system for the first time since Dr. Kim had left. He had been busy. The system's automated alerts had not triggered, so he had assumed everything was fine. Now looking at the data, he saw something concerning. A new mutation had appeared 2 weeks ago. It was small, barely detectable. The automated system had flagged it, but not triggered an alert because it fell just below the threshold. Thesix looked at Dr. Kim's notes. She had written that these small mutations sometimes became larger ones. He should prepare a vaccine modification just in case, but how? He did not understand the complex biochemistry the way she had. He sent messages to other Andorian doctors, but none of them knew either. Dr. Kim and her team had been the experts. They were gone now. He decided to wait and see. Perhaps the mutation would remain small. Perhaps it was nothing to worry about. On day 90, the last human ships departed from Council space. Admiral Chen commanded the final convoy. It consisted of 43 ships carrying the last 3,000 human personnel. They had been working on the most critical projects, staying until the very last moment to ensure proper handoffs. Elena was on the flagship. She stood on the bridge as they prepared to cross the border into human-controlled space. Behind them lay the galaxy they had tried to be part of for 200 years. Ahead lay home. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," the navigation officer said. Chen looked at the star map. So many places humans had worked, had helped, had given their time and expertise and lives. All left behind now. "Any messages from the Council?" he asked. "None, sir," Chen smiled bitterly. "Of course not." To the end, they could not even manage a simple goodbye. "Take us home," he said. The ships engaged their drives and crossed into human space. Behind them, they left the galactic community. Ahead, they faced an uncertain future. But for the first time in 200 years, they would face it with dignity. Earth received them with celebration. Millions lined the streets in major cities. The returning workers were treated as heroes. They had stood up for humanity's dignity. They had refused to be treated as inferiors any longer. The mood was jubilant, but Elena did not feel jubilant. She felt tired and concerned. She knew what was coming. She had seen the data. The galaxy was going to struggle without humanity, and they would blame humans for it. They would say humanity abandoned them. They would never understand that humanity had simply stopped accepting disrespect. That night, Earth sealed its borders, not with hostility. The message sent to all Council species was polite and clear. Humanity wishes the Galactic Council well. We will maintain peaceful relations and honor all existing treaties regarding borders and neutral zones. However, we will no longer participate in council affairs or projects. We ask that you respect our territory as we respect yours. Goodbye. No threats, no demands, just closure. The door closing quietly on 200 years of trying. In the council chamber, Thexelar read the message with barely concealed satisfaction.
They have isolated themselves, he announced to the assembly.
Within a year, they will realize their mistake. Their economy will collapse without galactic trade. Their colonies will struggle without the transit network. They will come back, humbled and apologetic. Most of the council agreed. A few members like Rixtar felt uneasy. She thought about Michael's last words. Pay attention to what happens after we're gone. She decided she would pay attention. She had a feeling it was important. Meanwhile, humanity turned inward. The returned workers brought knowledge and experience. They had learned things working across the galaxy. Now they would use that knowledge for humanity alone. Research programs expanded. Infrastructure projects began. Human colonies that had been struggling suddenly received the expert help they had been sending to alien worlds. Dr. Kim established a new medical research center on Earth. Engineer Wright designed improvements for human space stations. The farmers who had been feeding alien worlds now optimized human agricultural systems. The diplomats who had been mediating alien conflicts now worked on human organizational efficiency. The teachers who had been educating alien youth now expanded human educational programs. For 200 years, humanity had been giving away its best, its brightest minds, its greatest innovations, its hardest workers. Now suddenly all of that was focused on human worlds. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Human colonies thrived. Human technology advanced rapidly. Human society strengthened. They were not isolated. They still had their own network, connecting human worlds. They still traded among themselves. They still explored. But they did it for themselves now, not for others. And they were happier. The constant stress of seeking approval from species that would never give it was gone. Humans could simply be human. Elena watched all this from her retirement home in Geneva. She had stepped down as ambassador. There was no need for a galactic ambassador anymore. She spent her days reading reports, tending her garden, and waiting. Waiting for the galaxy to realize what it had lost. It would not take long. 2 months after the humans left, the first major failure hit the transit network. Junction 7 in the Beta Quadrant collapsed without warning. 12 star systems suddenly found themselves isolated. Ships that had been in transit when the junction failed were stranded. It took 3 days to rescue them all. The Council's engineers rushed to investigate. They examined the junction's ancient machinery. The Forerunners had built it 12,000 years ago, and it had functioned perfectly all that time. Now it was dead. Burned out. The engineers could not determine why. Rixtar, watching the engineering reports, remembered something. She accessed the Council archives and searched for human proposals. It took her an hour to find them. Selena Vasquez's presentation about the transit network, the warnings about cascade failures, the solution using modified harmonic dampeners. She read through the proposal carefully. The humans had predicted this exact failure. Not just that it would happen, but when and where. They had explained the mechanism. They had provided a solution, and the Council had laughed at them. Rixtar sent the proposal to the engineering team. They reviewed it and attempted to implement the human solution, but they could not make it work. The math was correct. The theory was sound, but something was missing. Some intuitive understanding that the humans possessed but had not fully documented. Engineering was not just about following formulas. It required a certain way of thinking, a way of seeing connections between systems. The engineers gave up after 2 weeks. They decided to repair Junction 7 using traditional methods. It would take 6 months and cost 40 times more than the human solution would have, and it might not work. 3 days later, Junction 12 failed, then Junction 4, then Junction 9. The cascade was beginning exactly as the humans had predicted. Each failure isolated more systems. Trade slowed. Travel became uncertain. The galaxy's economic backbone was fracturing. Chancellor Thexelar called an emergency council session. This is a temporary setback, he insisted. The transit network has experienced problems before. We will repair it. We do not need human help to maintain our own infrastructure. But the problems multiplied. The Andorian plague mutation that Thesix had noticed grew larger. Within a month, it had evolved into a strain that the existing vaccines could not prevent. Cases began appearing, then deaths. Essex frantically tried to develop a new vaccine, but he lacked Dr. Kim's expertise. He made mistakes. The new vaccine he created was only 30% effective. The Andorian government requested help from the council. The council sent their best medical team, but none of them understood the adaptive vaccine system the way the human team had. They tried to modify it and made it worse. The plague spread to 3 neighboring systems. The 12 agricultural worlds continued to struggle. Crop yields dropped to 50% of normal levels. Food prices began rising across the galaxy. Planets that had been food exporters started importing food just to feed their own populations. The council agricultural advisors could not understand what was wrong. The farmers were following the human instructions exactly. But farming was not about instructions. It was about understanding the land. The Therix and Veloth dispute escalated. Without human mediators to smooth over the small conflicts became medium conflicts, then large ones. Border skirmishes broke out. Trade stopped. Diplomatic relations severed. Within 3 months of the humans leaving, the Therix and Veloth were at war. It was not a large war. Not yet. But it was the first major conflict in the region in 20 years. The council tried to mediate, but their mediators lacked the cultural knowledge the human diplomats had possessed. Every attempt to negotiate peace failed. Across the galaxy, similar problems emerged. Research projects stalled because human scientists were no longer there to provide their unique perspectives. Space stations experienced maintenance failures because human engineers were no longer there to handle the complex repairs. Educational programs faltered because human teachers were no longer there to adapt curricula to different learning styles. The galactic economy began contracting. Humans had been crucial middlemen in hundreds of trade relationships. They had no ancient feuds, no historical grievances. Other species had trusted them to be neutral. Now those trade relationships fell apart as old suspicions resurfaced. A Draxi colony found itself in crisis when its orbital station suffered a critical failure. The station had been designed with human help, and humans had been maintaining it for years. Now, without human expertise, the local engineers struggled to fix it. They had to evacuate the station. 3,000 Draxi became homeless. The problems were not catastrophic. Not yet, but they were constant. Every day brought new reports of systems failing, projects stalling, conflicts escalating. The galaxy had functioned smoothly for so long. Now it was stumbling, struggling, slowly falling apart. Rixtar began compiling data. She was a scientist. She needed to understand what was happening. She created a database of all the problems that had emerged since the humans left. Then she cross-referenced them with human involvement before the withdrawal. The results shocked her. 73% of galactic infrastructure had involved human expertise. 58% of medical services had relied on human doctors or human-designed systems. 84% of diplomatic resolutions in the past 50 years had involved human mediators. Humans had been integral to virtually every aspect of galactic civilization. How had no one noticed? How had the council been so blind? She realized the answer. Humans had been too good at their jobs. They had solved problems so efficiently that no one remembered the problems existed. They had maintained systems so well that no one remembered the systems needed maintenance. They had prevented conflicts so effectively that no one remembered conflicts happened. Their work had been invisible because it was so competent, and when something is invisible, you do not respect it. You do not value it. You take it for granted. Rixtar took her findings to the council. She requested time to present her research. Chancellor Thexlar granted it reluctantly. He was tired of hearing about the humans. They were gone. The galaxy needed to move on. Rixtar stood before the council and displayed her data. Charts showing the correlation between human involvement and system functionality. Graphs demonstrating the decline in various metrics since the withdrawal. Statistical analysis proving that humans had been essential, not supplementary. For 200 years, humans were the glue holding galactic civilization together, she said. We did not see it because they did their jobs so well. They were doctors, engineers, diplomats, teachers, farmers, mediators. They were everywhere, doing everything. And we treated them like children. Like servants. Like they should be grateful we allowed them to help us. She paused, letting the data sink in. Some counselors looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. Thexler's crystalline form had darkened. a sign of distress. They did not leave because they were emotional or immature. Rixtar continued. They left because we gave them no choice. We took their help and gave nothing in return. Not respect. Not recognition. Not even basic courtesy. They built our infrastructure. They saved our lives. They prevented our wars, and we laughed at them. She displayed one final chart. A projection of galactic decline if current trends continued. Within 5 years, the economy would be in severe recession. Within 10 years, multiple species would be at war. Within 20 years, galactic civilization as they knew it would collapse. We need them back, Rixtar said simply. Not because they need us. Because we need them. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some councillors agreed with Rixtar. Others refused to believe humans were that important. Still others argued that reaching out to the humans would show weakness. Chancellor Thexler was silent for a long time. Finally he spoke. We will send a diplomatic mission to human space. We will inquire about the possibility of renewed cooperation. It was not an admission of guilt. It was barely an acknowledgement of need. But it was something. The council voted to authorize the mission. They would go to Earth and speak with humanity. But there was a problem. The council had spent 200 years not bothering to understand humans. They did not know human culture. They did not understand human values. They had no idea how to properly approach humanity after what had happened. Thexler assigned Rixtar to lead the delegation. She had worked closely with a human. She had been friends with one. Surely she understood them better than most. Rixtar accepted the assignment with trepidation. She remembered Michael's face when he left. The sadness in his eyes. The dignity in his departure. She had watched a proud people walk away from a galaxy that had used them and discarded them. Now she had to convince them to come back. She began preparing for the mission. She read everything she could about human history and culture. She studied human philosophy and art. She tried to understand what motivated them, what they valued, what they needed. One thing became clear. Humans valued respect above almost everything else. They had endured hardship, struggled, fought, and suffered throughout their history. But they had never accepted being treated as less than equal. Their entire history was a story of demanding dignity. The council would have to offer more than economic incentives. More than trade deals. They would have to offer what they had never offered before. Genuine respect. Rixtar wondered if the council was capable of that. She wondered if Thexler, with his 600 years of superiority, could humble himself enough to treat humans as equals. She sent a message to Earth. It was formal and careful. The Galactic Council requests an audience with human leadership to discuss matters of mutual concern. We hope humanity will grant us the opportunity for dialogue. The response came 3 days later. 5 words. Your delegation will be received. Nothing more. No warmth, no friendliness. Just acknowledgement. The coldness of it made Rixtar's branches shiver. Humans had always been warm, friendly, eager to help. This formal distance was unsettling. It meant something had fundamentally changed in the relationship. The delegation prepared to depart. Thexler himself would go, along with Rixtar and representatives from the species most affected by human absence. They loaded their ship with data showing the galactic crisis. They prepared proposals for renewed cooperation. But Rixtar had a sinking feeling. The council still did not understand. They thought this was about economics and infrastructure. They thought they could negotiate a trade deal. They did not realize this was about something deeper, something that could not be measured in credits or trade agreements. This was about dignity, and dignity once lost was very hard to restore. The council delegation arrived at Earth 1 year after humanity's departure. They expected to see a civilization in decline, isolated from galactic trade, cut off from the transit network. Surely humanity would be struggling. They expected desperate leaders eager to negotiate a return. What they found shocked them. Earth was thriving. The cities gleamed with new construction. Orbital stations bustled with activity. Human ships moved efficiently through their own network of transit points. The economy was not just stable, it was growing. Reports showed that human colonies throughout their space were experiencing unprecedented prosperity. Chancellor, Thexler's crystalline form flickered with confusion as their ship approached Earth. How is this possible? Without galactic trade, they should be suffering. Rixtar had done her research. For 200 years, humanity sent its best people to work for us. Its brightest scientists. Its most skilled engineers. Its wisest teachers. Now all those people are working for humanity. Plus, they no longer bear the economic burden of supporting galactic infrastructure that primarily benefited other species. They were received at the United Nations Assembly Hall in Geneva. The building was old by galactic standards but elegant. Human guards escorted them through corridors lined with art depicting human history. Rixtar noticed the recurring themes: struggle, resistance, freedom, independence. Humans celebrated their battles against oppression. They were shown to a conference room. Large windows overlooked the city. The delegation waited. Thexlar had prepared a speech. He would acknowledge the current difficulties in council space. He would offer generous trade terms. He would suggest a gradual reintegration. He would be magnanimous. The door opened. Secretary General Amara Okafor entered. She was a woman in her 60s, gray-haired and dignified. Her presence filled the room. The delegation stood respectfully. Chancellor Thexlar, she said. Councillor Rixtar, representatives, welcome to Earth. Please sit. They sat. Thexlar began his prepared speech. Secretary General, we come here today to discuss. Amara held up a hand. He stopped, surprised. No one interrupted a Chancellor of the Galactic Council. Before you continue, Amara said, I need to ask you a question. Do you know what you are apologizing for? Thexlar's form flickered. Apologizing? We have come to discuss renewed cooperation. The galaxy is experiencing certain difficulties and... Let me be more direct, Amara said. You are here because your galaxy is falling apart without us. You want us to come back and fix it. But before we discuss that, I need to know if you understand why we left in the first place. Thexlar struggled for words. This was not how negotiations were supposed to go. You left because we rejected your proposal about the transit network. We admit that was an error in judgment. Your analysis was correct. We should have listened. No, Amara said. That is not why we left. She stood and activated a holographic display. Images began appearing. Humans working in labs, on space stations, in fields, and hospitals. Thousands of images documenting 200 years of human effort across the galaxy. Dr. James Chen, Amara said, pointing to an image of an elderly man in a lab coat. Spent 30 years developing the cure for the Andorian plague. Saved millions of lives. The Council never officially acknowledged his work. He died believing his life's greatest achievement had been credited to someone else. Another image. A woman standing beside a massive agricultural facility. Professor Maria Santos. Ended famine on 12 worlds. Her techniques are still being used. The Council thanked her by excluding her from the agricultural summit celebrating her own work. More images. Engineers, teachers, doctors, diplomats. Ambassador Rodriguez. Engineer Kimani, Dr. Petrov, Captain Lee, Teacher Jackson. Thousands of humans who gave years of their lives to help the galaxy. And you know what they all have in common? Thexlar was silent. They were all treated as if they should be grateful you let them help, Amara said. Every single one of them experienced casual cruelty. Dismissive attitudes. Being excluded from social events. Having their ideas stolen. Being interrupted in meetings. Being treated like children playing at being adults. She displayed personal logs, diary entries, messages home. The delegation watched as human after human described their experiences in council space. The constant reminders that they were inferior. The 1,000 small humiliations. The grinding exhaustion of never being respected. We did not leave because you rejected one proposal, Amara said quietly. We left because after 200 years of helping you, you never once treated us as equals. You took our medicine, our engineering, our food, our diplomacy, our blood and sweat and tears, and you gave us nothing in return. Not recognition, not respect, not even basic courtesy. The room was silent. Even Thexlar, who had led the council for 600 years, had no words. Rixtar spoke up. Her voice was soft, ashamed. You are right. We took you for granted. We saw your contributions as ordinary, expected. We never appreciated how much you did because you did it so well. And when you tried to tell us about problems, we assumed you were wrong because you were young. We were arrogant. We were blind. We were wrong. Amara looked at Rixtar. There was something in her expression that softened slightly. You worked with Dr. Torres, did you not? For 12 years, Rixtar said. He was my colleague. My friend. He speaks highly of you, Amara said. He said you were one of the few who treated him as an equal. Rixtar felt a surge of relief. Michael did not hate her. That was something. Thexler finally spoke. His voice had changed. The crystalline resonance that usually carried such authority now sounded hollow. What would it take for humanity to return to the council? We are not coming back, Amara said. Not as we were. The words hung in the air. Thexlar's form darkened with distress. Then the galaxy will collapse. Billions will suffer. Yes, Amara said. And whose fault is that? She let that sink in for a moment. Then she continued. However, we are not cruel. We do not want billions to suffer because their leaders were arrogant. We will help the galaxy recover, but only under new terms. She displayed a document. The delegation read it carefully. The terms were clear and non-negotiable. First, Amara said, humanity will be recognized as full and equal partners in the Galactic Council. Not junior members. Not newcomers, equals. Our votes carry the same weight as any other species. Second, all past human contributions will be formally acknowledged. Dr. Chen will receive posthumous recognition for curing the Andorian plague. Professor Santos will be honored for her agricultural innovations. Every human who contributed to galactic civilization will have their work properly credited. Third, the Council will establish formal cultural exchange programs. Your species will learn about human culture, history, and values. We will learn about yours. Understanding breeds respect. Fourth, anti-discrimination protocols will be established and enforced. No species will be treated as inferior based on age or technology level. Merit and contribution will be the only measures that matter. And finally, Amara said, looking directly at Thexler, the Council will learn to say two words it has never said to us before. Thank you. Thexler studied the document. Every fiber of his being resisted. 600 years of leadership. 600 years of authority. And now he had to humble himself before these young upstarts. But he looked at the data Rixtar had shown the Council. The projections of galactic collapse. The suffering that was already occurring. The wars that would come if things continued as they were. He had a choice. Pride or survival. Arrogance or humility. The old way or a new way. For the first time in 600 years, Thexlar felt something he had not felt before. Shame. Deep, genuine shame. He had led the Council to this point. He had fostered the culture of superiority. He had dismissed human contributions and laughed at human proposals. This crisis was his fault. He looked at Amara, this human woman who had the strength to walk away from an entire galaxy, who had the dignity to refuse disrespect, even when it would have been easier to accept it, who was offering help even after being treated so poorly. We accept your terms, Thexlar said. All of them. And? Amara prompted gently. Thexlar's crystalline structure actually cracked slightly as he spoke. The words did not come easily. But they came. Thank you, he said, for 200 years of service. For the lives you saved, for the problems you solved, for the peace you maintained, for everything you gave us that we never properly acknowledged. Thank you, and I am sorry. We were wrong to treat you as we did. I was wrong, Amara nodded. That is a start, she said. 5 years had passed since the Council delegation left Earth with humanity's terms. 5 years of rebuilding. 5 years of change. 5 years of learning. Elena Vasquez stood at the viewing platform of the rebuilt Junction 7. The massive transit network hub hummed with activity. Human engineers worked alongside Velothian technicians and Draxi specialists. The atmosphere was different now. There was respect in how they spoke to each other. Genuine collaboration. Dr. Kim walked up beside her. The doctor had returned to the Andorian homeworld 2 years ago. The plague had been contained, but it had been difficult. They listen now, Dr. Kim said, watching a group of Andorian doctors consulting with human colleagues. They actually listen. They had to learn the hard way, Elena replied. Sometimes that is the only way lessons stick. The transit network was functioning again. 90% of the junctions had been repaired using the human solution. The ones that remained were scheduled for completion within the year. It had taken time. It had taken effort, but it had worked. More importantly, the Council engineers now understood the technology. They had learned from working with humans rather than dismissing human expertise. The Tharics and Veloth were at peace again. Human mediators had helped negotiate an end to their war. But this time the mediators trained local diplomats in conflict resolution. Now the two species had their own peacekeeping protocols. They still needed occasional human help, but they were learning. The agricultural worlds were thriving. Crop yields had returned to normal levels. The farmers had learned the techniques properly this time, with human teachers patient enough to explain the reasoning behind each method, understanding, not just instruction. The council had changed in other ways too. Formal recognition ceremonies had been held across the galaxy. Dr. Chen's name was now inscribed on monuments on the Andorian homeworld. Professor Santos received the highest agricultural honor from 7 different species. Ambassador Rodriguez was honored by the Therics and Veloth jointly for his peacekeeping work. Thousands of humans, living and dead, finally received the recognition they deserved. Elena thought about those ceremonies. They had been meaningful, but what mattered more was the everyday change. Human students attended galactic universities now, not as curiosities but as equals. Human research was published in major journals without alien names being added. Human workers were invited to social gatherings. Human proposals were considered seriously. It was not perfect. Old attitudes died slowly. There were still species and individuals who resented humanity's new position, but the overall culture had shifted. Respect was now the default, not the exception. "Do you regret it?" Dr. Kim asked. "Walking away?" Elena considered the question carefully. "No, we should have done it sooner. They never would have learned if we had stayed. We would still be the helpful children, eager to please. Walking away was the only way to force change. But so many suffered during that year we were gone," Dr. Kim said quietly. "People died who might have lived if I had been there." "I know," Elena said. "I think about that too. But if we had stayed, the pattern would have continued forever. Our grandchildren would have been treated the same way we were. Sometimes you have to accept short-term pain for long-term change." They watched a human engineer explaining something to a Draxi colleague. The Draxi was listening intently, asking questions, treating the human as an expert worth learning from. Such a simple thing, yet it had been impossible 5 years ago. Rixtar approached them. The Velothian counselor had become a regular visitor to human facilities. She had spent years studying human culture and had become one of the galaxy's foremost experts on humanity. "Ambassador Vasquez, Dr. Kim, I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all," Elena said. "How are you, Rixtar?" "Busy," Rixtar said. "The cultural exchange program is expanding. We have 3,000 young galactic citizens studying on Earth next semester, and 5,000 humans will study on various council worlds." The exchange program had been one of the most successful initiatives. Young people from different species learning together, living together, becoming friends. The next generation would not have the same prejudices as the old one. "Dr. Torres asked me to give you this," Rixtar said, handing Elena a data chip. "It is the completed research we have been working on. He said you would want to see the results." Elena took the chip. "You two are working together again?" "For the past 3 years," Rixtar said. "It is good to have my colleague back, though he makes me work much harder now. He says I was getting lazy." They all smiled. It was a small thing, this friendship between a Velothian and a human, but it represented something larger. The possibility of genuine connection across species. Chancellor Thexlar sent a message, Rixtar continued. "He wanted you to know the Council has approved full funding for the Advanced Research Initiative. The one humans proposed." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Without modification?" "Without suggesting we are too young to understand." "Without modification," Rixtar confirmed. He actually praised the proposal, said it showed innovative thinking. "Wonders never cease," Dr. Kim muttered. But Elena understood. Thexlar had changed more than most. The proud chancellor who had led the council for 600 years had learned humility. It could not have been easy for him. Yet he had done it. He had adapted. That took strength. "How is he doing?" Elena asked. Rixtar's branches drooped slightly, a gesture of concern. "He is older. He announced he will retire next year. He says it is time for new leadership. Leadership that grew up in this new era of cooperation." Elena felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Thexlar had made mistakes, serious ones, but he had also had the courage to admit them and change. That deserved acknowledgement. "Tell him," Elena said slowly, "that humanity appreciates his leadership during this transition. It could not have been easy for him. But he did what needed to be done. That takes strength of character. Rickstar's branches lifted, a sign of pleasure. I will tell him. He will appreciate that. They stood together watching the bustling activity of the transit network hub. Species that had once barely tolerated each other now worked side by side. Problems were being solved. Progress was being made. The galaxy was healing. Later that evening, Elena received a personal message from Thexelar himself. It was not an official communication, just a private note from an old leader to the person who had forced him to change. Ambassador Vasquez, it read, I have been reflecting on the past 5 years, on the lessons learned, on the changes that have occurred. I wanted to say something I should have said long ago. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to walk away. It was the only way we could learn to see. My species has a saying, sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing when to stop talking and start listening. Humanity taught us that. For 600 years I led the council. I thought I knew everything. But it took a young species barely 200 years in space to teach this old leader his most important lesson. Dignity cannot be given. It must be claimed. And respect must be earned, not demanded. You claimed your dignity. We learned to respect you. I am a better leader for it. The galaxy is a better place for it. I will step down next year. But I will do so knowing I helped guide the council through its most important transition, from arrogance to humility, from dismissal to respect, from taking to giving thanks. I am grateful I lived long enough to see this change. Gratefully, Thexelar. Elena read the message 3 times. She thought about the crystalline being who had laughed at her proposal 5 years ago, who had dismissed humanity so casually, who had changed so completely. She composed a reply. Chancellor Thexelar, your message means more than you know. Change is never easy, especially for those who have led for so long. But you showed that wisdom is not about always being right. It is about being willing to admit when you are wrong. You gave the galaxy a gift. You showed that even the oldest, most established powers can learn, can change, can grow. That is a lesson that will echo through the centuries. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your humility. And thank you for helping build a galaxy where all species, young and old, can stand as equals. With respect, Elena Vasquez. She sent the message and stood at her window, looking out at the city lights of Geneva. Beyond those lights, human ships traveled to distant stars. Human scientists worked in labs across the galaxy. Human teachers educated students of a dozen species. Human engineers maintained infrastructure on hundreds of worlds. Human diplomats negotiated peace. Human doctors saved lives, but now they did it as equals. Not as children seeking approval, not as inferiors grateful for scraps, as partners, as colleagues, as valued members of galactic civilization. 5 years ago, Elena had stood in the council chamber and said 5 words that changed everything. Then we will take our leave. It had been the hardest decision of her life. Walking away from 200 years of effort, abandoning a galaxy that depended on them, accepting that suffering would occur in their absence, but it had been necessary. The galaxy had needed to learn. Humanity had needed to claim its dignity. And in the end, both had emerged stronger. Elena's tablet chimed. A message from her granddaughter, who was studying xenobiology at a university on the Velothian homeworld. Grandma, just got invited to present my research at the Galactic Science Conference. Me, a human! Can you believe it? They said my work on adaptive genetics is groundbreaking. I'm so excited I could burst. Wish you could be there. Love you. Elena smiled. Her granddaughter would never know what it was like to be dismissed because of her species. She would never experience the casual cruelty of being treated as inferior. She would grow up in a galaxy that respected humans, that valued human contributions, that saw humans as equals. That was worth everything. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every difficult decision. Elena looked up at the stars visible through her window. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued its dance, species interacting, civilizations growing, problems being solved. And humans were part of it all. Not as servants or children, but as equal partners in building a better future. She whispered 3 words to herself. 3 words that had become humanity's quiet motto. 3 words that summed up everything they had learned. 3 words that would guide them for generations to come. Humanity, fuck yeah. Not because humans were superior, not because they were stronger or smarter or better than other species, but because they had the strength to demand the dignity they deserved. Because they had the courage to walk away rather than accept disrespect. Because they had shown the galaxy that respect must be earned through action, not commanded through age or power. They had walked away quietly. And in their absence, the galaxy had finally seen what they had done, what they had given, what they had meant. The empty spaces humans left behind had been teaching tools, lessons in appreciation, reminders that value is often invisible until it is gone. Now they were back. Not because the galaxy commanded it, but because humanity chose it. On their terms, with their dignity intact. As equals, Elena closed her eyes and smiled. Dr. Chen would have been proud. Ambassador Rodriguez would have been pleased. All those humans who had worked so hard for so long, who had never received the recognition they deserved, their sacrifices had not been in vain. They had built the foundation for this new era. Their grandchildren would inherit a galaxy that valued them. Tomorrow, Elena would return to Earth. She would retire properly this time. Tend her garden. Spend time with family. Let the next generation take over. They were ready. More than ready. They would lead humanity forward with wisdom learned from the past. They would never accept being treated as less than equal, and they would never forget that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. But tonight, Elena stood at her window and watched the stars. And she felt, for the first time in years, completely at peace. The galaxy had seen. The Council had learned. Humanity had triumphed, not through war or conquest, but through dignity, through the simple act of refusing to accept less than they deserved. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the ability to say no, to walk away, to choose yourself, and then when the time is right, to return on your own terms. Humanity had done just that, and the galaxy was better for it.